You almost got me.
Almost.
I thought you were going to do it.
Hello, everybody. I'm Pedro, and welcome to REboot.
Hi, and I'm Meredith, and we're happy to be here. We're going to talk about something interesting. We're going to talk about the Munsters.
So, guys, I have to let you know, I had a vision, a fantasy, if you will, that I would come home on Saturday night, and I'd put that popcorn in the microwave. We'd heat it up, those beautiful pops. I'd cut that bag open and spill its innards into a bowl, and we would share it. And we would watch Rob Zombie's The Munsters. And you would laugh and enjoy it. And I'd look at you right in your smug face and tell you, see, he is a fantastic filmmaker.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is not what occurred this last Saturday night.
Nope.
What occurred this last Saturday night was close to an abomination. But there will be a hold on any Rob Zombie talk, because we need to go through the show the way we normally do it, which is to talk about the original project, which would be the old TV show, The Munsters. So we're going to put a little break on Rob Zombie for just a little bit and not bring him up until after we talk about the original show.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what do you have to say about The Munsters' old sitcom?
Okay, so the Munsters TV show was made by Universal and released by NBC. It starred Fred Gwynne as Herman Munster, Yvonne DiCarlo as Lily Munster, Butch Patrick as Eddie Munster, and Al Lewis as Grandpa. And then there was Beverly Owen, who did Marilyn Munster for like 10 episodes, or 10 or 13, I can't remember. And then Pat Priest came in and did Marilyn's character for the rest of the series.
Okay, that's good to know.
It was created by Alan Burns and Chris Hayward. Theme music was by Jack Marshall, and there's 70 episodes total.
Okay, so I guess always my main question, the one thing I had for you when I know you were doing your research is, obviously the one thing to compare the show to is the Addams Family. Which one of those shows came first?
The Addams Family technically came first, but the Munsters followed pretty closely after. Once NBC heard that ABC was putting on a show about a family of monsters, they kind of jumped on that. And since they owned the rights to the old classic monsters like Frankenstein and
Universal.
Wolfman, and since they own that, it was easier for them to kind of spin that off into the Munsters TV show.
Yeah, that's why Herman has the bolts in his neck. That's what's actually copyrighted. The Frankenstein character actually is completely within the public domain. But if you put bolts on his neck, that's property of Universal.
Yeah.
So we take research here pretty seriously. When we do movies or whatever, we always watch the original film in its entirety. You know, no phones or whatever. We usually dedicate our attention to just whatever it is we're watching. This week we did a TV show, so that was a little bit different. Now, luckily for us, we were both pretty familiar with the Munsters.
Yeah.
This was a pretty big staple in reruns all throughout American television, either just local TV or Nick at Night. You know, you could always find, Munsters reruns all over the place.
Yeah, that's how I saw it, was Nick at Night.
Yeah, so I was pretty familiar with the property. So we did what we usually do. We did some research on what were the best episodes, and we took a look at some of those. I happen to have an old DVD lying around, but I put the disc in, and we start watching the show, and our daughter was present this time, because we didn't say, hey, don't come in here, because it's not like we're watching Nightmare on Elm Street. We're like, that's not really appropriate for a 5-year-old to watch. This was. And I think the thing that impressed me is that this show completely grabbed our daughter's attention.
5 years old.
5 years old, and she was able to take the show from the 60s and laugh and laugh and laugh.
Yeah, it was something really to behold, because it is from the 60s, and it is black and white, and it is old school, and it's one single camera operated.
Yeah.
And it's all those classic things that you would see in an old show. And she was able to be totally and utterly engaged with it.
Yeah, and that's the lesson of going back to watch the original show, is that there are so many great little moments in it. Yes. Is the comedy dated? Absolutely. Are the jokes cheesy? Yeah. But that doesn't really matter, because they're all pretty well done.
Yeah.
For what they are. I think everybody in this cast is more than, I'd say, game for the role. Everybody takes it really seriously, and it really looks like everyone's having a ton of fun.
Yeah. Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis actually worked together previously, They worked together on a great, or I guess a show that didn't last very long. It only ran for 2 years called Car 54, Where Are You?
Oh, yeah. Car 54, Where Are You?
Yeah. So
Another movie we'll cover with another terrible reboot.
they have great chemistry in the show
Yeah.
because of that, because they worked well together beforehand. And it's evident in their performances.
Yeah, it shows. Yeah, pretty much any episode you might watch, you can just tell that chemistry is right there.
Yeah.
They play off each other brilliantly. They work off each other for jokes. Like I said, even if you can see the punchlines coming a mile away, it's still, even in myself, a truly jaded viewer who has no soul, I can still watch these segments and still get a smirk out of them, maybe even a giggle. That chemistry is just there, and comedic timing, it doesn't matter what the jokes are or when they are. When it's there, it can always work.
Yeah.
And that's one thing about the old Munster show that's really interesting, is that comedic timing, is there from old episodes, whether it's, Herman building the Dragula, which obviously is another reference to future filmmaker. Future filmmaker Rob Zombie's music career. Or, Herman getting a job at the bank, or, we had a lot of fun watching the episode where Herman went undercover. Was protecting a woman, and Lily thought he was having an affair. Old classic sitcom stuff, but I smiled. I enjoyed the show. Did I give a full belly laugh about it? No, but I had a grin on my face and really loved it. And my daughter had the belly laughs. So I think the wholesomeness of this show really shines through, and the comedic value of it does, even today.
The show was produced by creators of Leave It to Beaver.
Okay, it certainly does have
it has that feel to it.
Yeah, it does. It does have that all-American sitcom kind of vibe to it, with the exception of the fact that everybody in the cast is a monster.
Yeah.
Except for Marilyn.
Now, you'd be happy to know that the Munsters topped the Addams Family in ratings at some point.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they completely overtaken by the Munster show.
See, that's really interesting, because I think today you would look at it in the very much the opposite way. Yeah, the Munsters are the bitch franchise to the Addams Family.
Well, the Addams Family had movies.
Well, yeah, the Addams Family had 2 excellent movies in the 90s. And I mean, they got a pair of cartoon reboots a couple years ago. Don't worry, guys. One day we'll do Addams Family, but the Munsters came up this time, so that's what we're doing first. The Munsters did have a few TV show reboots, which we didn't cover. I was a bit familiar with a few of them. 2 color reboots, I think one in the 80s and one in the early 90s. They didn't last very long, weren't anywhere near as successful, but I did see them a bit as a kid, because they would kind of lump those in the rerun chains, especially in the 90s. Not so much at Nick at Night. Nick at Night could respect what was like one TV show, you watch this and that's all it is.
Yeah.
But with, when you were watching the Munsters on regular cable, you might get an episode of the new Munsters in color. And pretty much everybody on that show kind of tries to ape the performances of the original, which is something to keep in mind as we talk about further reboots. But, this show was still something that I could definitely recommend anybody watching. I think if you're a fan of older sitcoms, you've never gotten around to watching the Munsters, I mean, it's something you really should do. You'll enjoy yourself. You'll enjoy it immensely. And I think if you're an old school horror fan, you'll definitely appreciate it. And I think if you're a Rob Zombie fan, you'll know some of the references within his music. Like if you're coming in from, let's just say you're a big time Rob Zombie fan. You've seen 31, Lords of Salem, his Halloween reboot, as well as The Devil's Rejects, and you're looking at this property for the first time, please, by all means, go to Peacock or wherever you can find the episodes, and wherever you might live at. And please, by all means, check them out. Watch a few. You're going to enjoy yourself. You're going to have a good time. And I think
they hold up.
If you consider yourself a horror fan, this is going to be some standard viewing for you, even if you're 18 years old and don't care about any sort of property from the 60s. You're going to have a smile on your face when you watch these. There's an inherent charm to them that is irresistible even today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really can't recommend this show kind of highly enough as something to, even if you're just going to put it on the background while you clean to some comfort food TV, it can certainly work for that. I can see why people absolutely love this show even after all these years.
So Yvonne DiCarlo, she was kind of like a last minute replacement. They had an idea they had somebody casted, they did the pilot, and they just weren't enamored with her. So
yeah, I cruised around YouTube today and I found a couple of clips from that original pilot show.
Yeah. Things
were a bit darker, and she was very much more Morticia than she is Lily. Very much more Morticia.
Well, Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis, when they hired Yvonne DiCarlo, were more than nervous about it. They didn't think that somebody who had because she had a big career. Mm-hmm. She was nominated for Oscars, for some of her portrayals.
Yeah.
So she was a seasoned actress. So they weren't sure if she was going to fit into the show. She was also a little bit standoffish when they first started filming. She kept to herself and stayed in her trailer.
Okay.
She often held up production by last-minute changes to her hair. She was constantly obsessed with her hair and how it looked.
It does show. I mean, honestly, if you watch that, her hair is always magnificent.
Yeah.
In almost every scene she's in, it really is. It's a true thing of horror beauty, that hair.
And she went through 5 hairdressers.
I don't doubt that at all, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it looks really good.
Yeah, I think so too. She just was very detail-oriented. But, with that caliber of actress, you can expect a little bit of diva quality to them.
Yeah, certainly so.
She's beautiful.
Yeah, she really is. Yeah, certainly beautiful. And you are right. Any actor or actress sort of worth their salt going to be a little bit of a diva. That ego comes into play, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah, because she's slumming it in TV.
Yeah. So she made sure everybody else would know that. But, from reports from the rest of the cast is that everybody else really got along. Fred Gwynne, classic Hollywood nice guy.
Yeah.
And obviously he's been in a bunch of other stuff. You would know him from
Pet Sematary.
Pet Sematary's where most.
Yeah.
Sometimes dead is better. He has that fantastic Maine accent in that movie. I could almost just watch Jed talking that whole movie.
Yeah.
just chewing up scenery in that Maine accent. Also, a favorite film of almost any lawyer My Cousin Vinny.
That's right. He's the judge.
Yeah. I mean, he has some fantastic comedic chops, if we're going to be perfectly honest here. That movie, but I mean, still, that movie holds up today as well. He's great in that and gives a great foil to go against Joe Pesci in that movie. Really, it's just fantastic work. Like I said, you can see that the level of comedic actor that was in the Munsters and really able to carry all those jokes back then gave him a very long career. You can see that ability to have comedic timing, didn't matter how tall he was, all that really matters. That's why he had a great career.
I think Fred Gwynne deserves a medal too for what he had to put up with his wardrobe.
Yeah. He was going to certainly get the worst of that with having actual makeup.
He was miserable. He had his feet were pavers boots with 4-inch soles. His thighs, arms, and torsos were covered in 40 pounds of foam. And he sat through 2 hours of makeup each day. He lost 10 pounds in 1 month.
I wouldn't doubt it, because we watched the episode where he became human again. And I was kind of surprised that they clearly obviously used the same costume he always wears and how much smaller it was just on regular Fred Gwynne when he's a pretty big dude.
Yeah.
So obviously they were puffing him up quite a bit. So you could see how much he really had on him. I'm sure that was an episode he loved where he didn't have to put that stupid makeup on every week, every day to shoot the show. 40
pounds of foam. It's so light. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing.
There were no safety standards on actors or anything back then. Yeah, they were just like, well, if he dies, he dies. They had the old Ivan Drago logic on what they would do to some of the actors back then. So you can imagine how miserable that was shooting out in Hollywood on the back lot of Universal back in the day.
They were actually going to cast John Carradine.
Oh, really?
I believe he's David Carradine's dad.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So he was going to be in the running for Herman Munster, but he just didn't take it. So we're glad that Fred Gwynne took it.
Yeah, everybody came together and made for a fantastic and iconic show.
One of the other things I wanted to mention was the famous car in the show. It was built by George Barris. He took 3 Model T Ford bodies to construct an 18-foot-long Munster mobile. It had brass radiators and fenders that were hand-formed. And then it had velvet upholstery that was blood red.
Blood red.
It took them 21 days to complete and $18,000 later.
Interesting. No, I never really thought about it, but it is quite a monstrosity of a vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. So that makes a lot of sense. It took them that much effort to get it done or to get it in there.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting, all the stuff that they had to go through just to make the car pretty neat.
It very much is. So you have a smile on your face now. We're talking about the Munsters. With that being said, I have to do the hard pivot to start talking about Rob Zombie's film.
Okay.
Let me ask you, before we get there, and before this movie started, what did you think of Rob Zombie as a filmmaker?
As a filmmaker, I think he's dog shit.
You don't want to sugarcoat that at all?
No,
straight up?
I think he's absolute dog shit. Yeah. I think that his movies are basically like a long music video, a very long, kind of boring music video.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. All right. Like I said, and this is why I told the story in the beginning. You have almost always hated the work of Rob Zombie.
Yeah.
And pretty much from the Devil's Rejects, I've been a fan of his work. And, I grew up as a fan of his music as well. It was all over the 90s. You couldn't really escape Rob Zombie tunes. And like I said, I did enjoy his musical work. And, for the most part, I've enjoyed his films. A few of them I haven't really dug, like Halloween and things like that. But, okay, you're not going to have any good. So let me start off with a few of the good things that I did like about the movie, right off the bat. The first thing is that this thing even got made.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I appreciate, is that you can tell from the movie and from some of the costumes and the sets that they had that Rob Zombie absolutely and truly loves the Munsters. Like, there is a huge fanboy within him for this show. You can just tell that. And the fact that a man who is known for gritty, nasty horror movies was able to get a major studio to give him money to make a family comedy in 2022 for that property is just insane and kind of bonkers to me.
Yeah.
And I love that idea. Like, I miss the old idea of what Hollywood was almost in the 90s, where just a weird film would get greenlit for no reason at all. And you'd have this weird bit of cinema. Was it always going to work? No. A lot of times it just leads to strange, forgettable movies. But sometimes you really could end up with some real gems, like something like was it Deadhead Fred? Or
Drop Dead Fred?
Drop Dead Fred, thank you. I think Redhead, that's a different thing. Drop Dead Fred. Like, that's a super weird movie about imaginary friends, but, that has struck a nice cult movie chord for a long time.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, and that's straight out of the Hollywood system. And that's just not something I think you would see today. And sort of the same thing with the Munsters, being able to get greenlit and being able to be made into the Hollywood system. Now, that being said, there is one thing I do want to mention, and before I get really into the nasty of the Munsters, I do want to talk about one other positive, and that is Daniel Roebuck. Daniel Roebuck plays the Count, or Grandpa. Mm-hmm. Now, we can't call him Grandpa in the movie because the Munsters, it's an origin story, a prequel.
Why did he decide to do that?
I guess he didn't want to mess with kids. He didn't want to have any kids in the movie. I'm assuming that's the only reason.
Makes no sense.
So, but I do want to say Daniel Roebuck is utterly fantastic as Grandpa Munster.
Yeah, he's good.
He does a really nice job. And in all honesty, I don't mean to be really nasty about it, but he's the only real professional actor that's in the main cast.
Yeah.
And it shows because he actually does a good job. He obviously does love the Grandpa Munster character because his impression, it's not an impression as much as his interpretation of the character. There's just enough there to keep it familiar and enough of his additions to make it really worth watching his performance. Daniel Roebuck's had a long career. He's worked with Rob Zombie in the past, but he's in one of my favorite TV movies ever, The Late Shift, and that's the story of David Letterman versus Jay Leno for The Tonight Show.
I didn't even recognize him with all that makeup.
Yeah, he played Jay Leno in that. Great performance by Kathy Bates in that movie, by the way. But that's where I got to know him. He's been in a lot of stuff over the years. Anyway, as I was talking about, so what's the logo at the front of this movie?
I don't know. I guess that was supposed to be some kind of throwback of some sort.
So it's the old Universal logo is how this movie starts out. We get that old easy intro from the 40s and the 50s. But this is not a true Universal film, in all honesty. This is actually done by Universal 1440 Entertainment. So I'm going to list a few of the classic movies that this place has done. Hard Target 2, The Scorpion King 4,
ooh,
Dragonheart 3,
Jesus,
Scorpion King 5, Jarhead 2 and 3, more Dragonheart sequels.
I had no idea there was more Jarheads.
Bulletproof 2, Kindergarten Cop 2, Big Fat Liar 2, Honey 3 and 2. I know I went backwards there. But as you might guess, there's also... Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about the classic Backdraft 2.
Backdraft 2?
Yeah, that's right. There's a sequel to Backdraft. So Universal 1440 has basically been going through the bottom of the bin of Universal's properties and digging up movies and giving them cheap, direct-to-video sequels that are made in Europe for tax benefits.
Wow.
So immediately as I said that to you, I can probably see some lights going off that you can understand why the movie looks like it does, as cheap as it is.
It looks so cheap.
Yeah, and that's what this movie is. So basically, this is a low-end cash grab to try to make a little money out of the Munsters. Now, what's really strange about a 1440 film is that they went with an established director, and that's never something that they do. They have a couple of guys they work with over and over again to churn out these terrible, terrible sequels. But they went with Rob Zombie this time, and, well, how do I put it? This movie is far worse than I thought it could have been. Even when I saw the original trailer, I didn't think it would end up as bad as this is.
Me too, actually. I was hoping that with a family-like flair to it, that he would do something more interesting.
Yeah.
But he did not.
No, he really didn't at all. He really didn't at all. I guess the one thing I have to ask you is, Rob Zombie is infamous for working with his people over and over again. You know, he doesn't usually work with a lot of professional actors, so sometimes that can be a huge detriment to him. But in this film, obviously, he casts his wife again.
Of course.
So with him casting his wife, and
his detriment.
Yeah, and not just his wife as well. He also cast another friend of his, Jeff Daniel Phillips, as Herman Munster. I guess I have to ask, which one of these non-actors do you think is the worst part of this cast?
Sherry Moon Zombie.
Sherry Moon?
Yeah, hands down. She's got a weird way of talking through the movie.
Well, I think the strangest thing about her performance is, if you go back and watch the sitcom, that's not how Lily acts.
No.
Yeah, that's sort of the strangest thing. They're like, oh, it's a throwback to the original performance. And it's like, well, no. Yvonne DiCarlo did not act that way at all.
Why did she do those weird things with her hands? You know, you can't see as an audience what I'm doing. But
even you watch the movie, she does do a lot of strange things with her hands and her fingers. The thing about it is, he had to have known that his wife is not a talented comedic actress. She's never done a comedy. She's only worked with him.
Yeah.
So to cast her in this part where she has to be basically the lead of a comedy, you have two non-actors basically as the lead of this comedy. I understand that Jeff has done a few more things with other talents, but you know, he's still not really known as a big time actor. Have these guys sort of carrying this movie, I think, is a huge disaster because they don't have any chemistry and they don't have any comedic timing at all. They fall in love because the story dictates.
Yeah.
Literally, like he just appears on the screen and there is
the bit of story you get that's not evident.
Yeah. So she just sees him on screen for the first time, and these it's like Creepshow. You know, when something bad would happen, they'd put like a stylized background behind a character to sort of indicate that comic book, like, oh, I'm so terrified, or like, I'm in love. They'd put hearts back there. That happens throughout the movie when there's, or I guess early on in the movie, when a character has to have a big moment. You know, like when they bring Herman back, they have lightning behind all the characters. They scream, it's alive. Same thing with Sherry Moon Zombie or Lily's character when she sees him, there's hearts behind her. This is Rob Zombie's style that he's adding to the movie. Along with the garish colors, which I actually do think kind of work because it does make the movie a bit more like a living cartoon. Yeah,
that's actually one of the things I was going to ask you is what's with the green light? It's like green light surrounding everybody, and mainly Grandpa. I noticed that it was harshest on him.
Yeah. Like it's, at some point, I was kind of curious at how they actually put the makeup on him since they knew they were going to hit him with a green or purple light, so that. You know, how that was actually going to look on screen. Because I know originally Rob Zombie wanted to shoot wanted to shoot black and white. He did not want to shoot color. But there was no way that Universal was going to let him do that because that just immediately limits your opportunity and your audience. So he had to shoot color. So he went the complete opposite way and shot with the color saturation all the way to 100 with all the crazy colors flying everywhere. It looks like, you know, bus station Suspiria at times.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Rob Zombie's films as you are, and that was what I was going to ask you. Is this something that he does in his films normally with the weird lighting?
Sometimes, yeah. There can be some stylized and lit sequences like that. I can think of The House of a Thousand Corpses does it a lot, but he's straight coming from music videos at that time, so that's a little bit less of a narrative as much as it is like a collection of horror sequences.
Yeah, that's why I hate that movie.
In the Devil's Reject's a much grittier film. There's a bit of it in there. Halloween doesn't really have it. Halloween 2 does, especially for a lot of the sequences with Sherry Moon Zombie, where she's actually pretty decent in that movie. I know you find that hard to believe, but she actually is pretty good as Michael Myers' ghost mother in that movie. And those sequences do have some stylized lighting. As he got a little bit later in his career, Lords of Salem, he found lower budgets. You could find a little bit more of that stylized lighting creeping in, but never quite like this. Pretty much the entire Transylvania sequence is bathed in this kind of light, unless they're outdoors.
It's awful.
Yeah, unless they're outdoors in the sun.
Yeah, and that's another weird thing. It's like the first half of the movie is all these weird lights, and then the second half is like natural lighting and weird stuff.
Yeah.
I don't understand why he would have done that.
I don't, well, I mean, I think he's trying to, well, because, yeah, it even happens before they head to 1313 Mockingbird Lane. You can see it kind of dip off.
Yeah.
At a certain point. Now, I'm not really certain why he did that. It doesn't really add towards anything, to be perfectly honest, that he takes it away. It's not like like someone's learning a lesson, so you're getting less crazy colors, or they're becoming more normal, or falling in love. There's no real theme to connect to why he would do it. It's just another thing in the movie that happens. And I guess that's kind of that's my biggest complaint about the film. Yes, the acting from some of Zombie's troupe can be pretty bad, and I think the production quality isn't where it really should be at. But this story, the script, is barely that. I mean, you're talking about really a collection of sequences, horror vignettes like horror comedy vignettes that sort of occur, and the movie just kind of clangs around from one scene to the other, and that's our story pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Because Herman is brought back, Lily needs to look for love, and it just so happens our story kind of collides, and people just kind of happen to find each other in Transylvania. It
feels like the movie is a collection of mini stories. It's like he tried to do a TV show in a movie.
Yeah, that is certainly what it feels like. When we were trying to bone up on more research here, before we realized that the Munsters were on Peacock, we went to YouTube and typed in the Munsters, and we found a playlist of some of the clips. And so I said, well, I'll watch some of these while I'm waiting. And that's totally what the movie felt like. Just a collection of random clips from this world that we're barely privy to. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the idea of Transylvania, like this weird monster world. Like, that's so much fun. Especially like the big 50s robot and like the pharaoh mummy. Like, all that kind of stuff in the background is kind of neat. But
I like the stuff with Nosferatu.
Oh, Orlok?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's okay. His disco vampire. Might have been one of the few moments early on where I smiled slightly.
I did enjoy that.
Yeah, it might have been one of the only.
I'll give it that.
Yeah, but even then, it doesn't lead to a joke. She's just like, I'm going to go. And he's like, okay. And that's it. There's no joke. There's no gag. It doesn't lead to anything. Like, at no point is Vampire Disco on the charts or anything. Like, there's not a running gag in this movie. Rob Zombie doesn't know how to write a comedy, and nobody told him, like, hey, man, none of this shit's funny. I mean, that's the biggest problem. The story doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have... Nobody learns a lesson throughout the movie.
No.
I mean, the bare minimum of what a screenplay has to do. Grandpa and Herman don't like each other. He doesn't trust Herman. And Herman eventually loses the house. Herman never redeems himself. Grandpa never learns to trust him for any reason. The movie doesn't address these issues at all. They just get a huge Deus Ex Machina at the end of the brother winning the lottery, or not winning the lottery, but coming up with a huge bet, and now they're rich, which might be one of the worst endings to a movie I can think of, because it's a true non-ending. They didn't deserve it. Nothing said they needed to get that money. They didn't go through anything. We didn't see the brother even go to the Vegas tables to try to win, which could have been a fun sequence. None of that occurs. It just happens because the movie has to come to a fucking end.
Yeah.
That's the only reason it's there.
Also, the movie doesn't feel particularly smart or at all.
No. It's not going to be a particularly smart movie. It is a children's film coming from a lower budget studio, so that can be a problem. But you are right; it certainly doesn't feel like an intelligent film in any way, shape, or form. It feels very amateurish.
Do you think that we'll ever get a movie where Sherry Moon Zombie doesn't star in it? Or do you think that he's willing to tank his directorial career for it?
Well, I do want to talk about something I think is really beautiful, like how he loves his wife.
Okay, well, yeah.
Okay, no. Let's not discount that. The man absolutely loves his wife and his friends because he chooses to work with them and only them over and over and over again. So in that way, there is a real beauty into what the Rob Zombie cinematic world is. Like, you're coming into this weird little family and you're watching the movies that they make that don't always make sense or aren't necessarily fine for the rest of society to see, really.
Yeah, but you love your wife too, and you wouldn't necessarily star me in your movies.
No, absolutely not.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're not.
We're high school sweethearts, for God's sake.
Yeah, even though you might have more talent than Sherry Moon. And listen, Sherry Moon's gotten better at things, but I mean, if you do anything long enough, you're going to get fairly decent at it. And the fact is, this is as good as she can be has always been troubling. You know, I had more problems with her performance in like Lords of Salem, where she has to be kind of like a regular person. She struggles with that. Even though I thought she was okay as Michael Myers' stripper mom. I thought she was fine there. I really did. I didn't have a problem with her performance. And trust me, I'm the first person to let you know when she stinks. She wasn't that bad there. But that does get into another issue with Rob Zombie writing the movie, is that almost every character kind of becomes an asshole, because that's just Rob Zombie's classic way of writing, you know. No one talks about skull fucking anybody like he does in a lot of other scripts. But this, you know, I think Herman's a jerk in this movie.
Yeah, because, you know, Grandpa and Herman actually get together. They understand each other. They, you know, they get each other in the TV show.
Yeah.
In this movie, Grandpa doesn't like Herman at all.
No.
Why do you think Rob Zombie chose to pit them against each other?
Well, I think
for a story.
It's actually one of the better elements of the movie is that they have some conflict, because it's something different from the show, and it's a story. It's something you can latch onto, because our other element of story, like the real estate scam, is barely anything. It's a couple of scenes just to justify why we have to go to 1313 Mockingbird Lane in the final act of the movie. But otherwise, I mean, the story doesn't really amount to anything, to be perfectly honest, other than giving them one repercussion that doesn't really seem to inconvenience the Munsters all that much. Making Grandpa and Herman hate each other is an interesting idea, because you can talk about how they eventually grew to become friends, or how they grew to depend on each other, or how he learned to trust Herman. But that was sort of my complaint earlier, is the movie doesn't do that at all. It doesn't repair their relationship. It doesn't tell you why they eventually got along. Other than just, I got used to Herman, is literally the only thing that Grandpa could say. You know, because at one point they put him in charge of the family after he already lost the house in what is maybe the dumbest idea. Like, he just signs a random piece of paper and somehow that's the deed over the house. Maybe the laws in Transylvania are fucked. What do I know? But I mean, the point of it is, like, it's lazy. For a script that's already really lazy, it's another lazy idea on the top of it, just so we can get the Munsters out of Transylvania and to 1313 Mockingbird Lane, which I need to mention, that only occurs with what? 21 minutes left in the movie? Mm-hmm. 21 minutes. Like, I remember Rob Zombie on his Instagram went through this whole thing about, we've created this perfect replica of the old house. We have the neighborhood set up, which is clearly not in America. That's clearly somewhere in Romania. And very much looks as such. But like, you have all this there, and you're only in this iconic location. Herman is only in his standard attire for like 15 or 20 minutes of this entire movie, which is so long. For a kid's movie, almost 2 hours, that's close to absurd, to be honest.
Yeah.
Especially since not a whole lot really happens in the movie.
Oh, it's so boring.
Yeah, like, I'm aware that there can be like there's a 2.5 hour cut. But man, like, this movie just kind of drags along. I couldn't imagine a longer cut of this thing.
What do you think about the makeup?
I think the makeup team did an okay job.
See, I didn't think the makeup was very good either.
I mean,
because it seemed like Rob Zombie was trying to emulate the look of the TV show.
Yeah.
Which is fine if the TV show was shot in color, but it's shot in black and white. So you and I very well know that when you shoot in black and white,
the color,
things are different. Yeah. Makeup's going to be different. Mm-hmm. And it just feels like he used the same kind of color palette.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like Herman's green is like almost glowing off the screen.
Yeah.
You know, the blue that the blue he is almost reminds me of like one of the zombies from the original Dawn of the Dead. Like, he's that shade of blue. Very, very blue. Lily's just kind of whitish, right? She's just kind of white.
Yeah.
So I don't have any problem with the way Lily looks, to be honest.
Lily's fine.
Yeah, I think it's a good interpretation of how that character is. Even if it doesn't look a whole lot like Lily Munster did on that show, but that's fine. Herman has a lot of iconic attires from the show. You know, we get to see him in the Dracula suit when he's performing at the rock concert, but we rarely get to see him in his actual normal, you know, Herman attire, which, you know, it doesn't help. You know, I think the makeup on him is fine, if all particularly particularly unimpressive. Same thing with Grandpa. And honestly, I think like some of the other monster designs in Transylvania were pretty poor.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, I think Orlok is fine.
Yeah, Orlok looked good.
Yeah, but we've done the Nosferatu character quite a bit, so it's not that big of a deal. But some of the other characters, I mean, they look like Halloween costumes. Later on, there's a sequence where they go and have an impromptu neighborhood rave on Halloween, which happens a lot in America, I guess. I don't know. I'm in the wrong parts of America, I suppose. Like in that sequence, those costumes on like the kids and on the people in the town, they look about the same as the costumes did in Transylvania.
Yeah.
It's barely any different except for the colored lighting. I mean, that's the only real indication that we have. I mean, you really, and people have said it before, but you really feel like this production team just raided a Spirit Halloween store for almost every prop in this movie.
They probably did.
So, I mean, that's one thing to keep in mind. Keep in mind about it. I mean, it just doesn't look that impressive. When we talked about this production company, Universal 1440, I mean, you can see them pinching pennies and squeezing this budget because it just doesn't look very good.
My last question, does the soundtrack suit the film? Because in my opinion, it didn't suit the film.
It does, because it's a Rob Zombie film, so I think its soundtrack really did suit the film, to be perfectly honest.
Because you, like I said, you know more about Rob Zombie movies than I do.
Well, I mean, like some of it doesn't necessarily fit a family comedy, to be honest. And I do want to stress, by the way, as a family comedy, I put on the Munsters, as I mentioned earlier, the old TV show for my daughter, and she loved it. I put this movie on for her, and in about 15 minutes, she was clamoring for anything else to be put on.
You didn't tell me that.
Yeah, I know. I told you she loved it because I wanted you to be afraid that she was going to throw it on one day and make you watch it. But she did not care for this version of the characters at all. I even skipped around a little bit to when Herman had come to life already. And she never chuckled at anything Herman did or liked it. She was playing with dolls by the 15-minute mark, while she really watched almost 2.5 hours of the original show. So, I mean, that's something to keep in mind, for the quality of this film as something that's supposed to be for children. Well, I mean, which it is. It is a family movie. Like, I'll give Rob Zombie that. He did deliver a PG movie. Very much so. But, I mean, it's just not... I can't imagine a kid that would want to watch this movie and just be into it. You know, and decisions like how he chooses to portray things, like when they finally go to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
First of all, like he just sees one random person that's on TV, says, I'm the most handsome actor in LA, and he decides, I'm going to go to Los Angeles. And everyone's like, sure, whatever. No money is talked about or anything like that. They just had their financial lives ruined by losing the house. But it's not a big deal. They can just fly to LA and buy a new house.
Yeah,
right?
No big deal.
So, but it's not a big problem if you do that. But if you tell me the whole crux of this movie with the real estate scam is that it will make them bankrupt and there's no repercussions for it, then what the fuck have I been doing for an hour and 20 minutes, right?
Wasting your time.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of those things. And as I was mentioning, going back to your original question, which was the soundtrack, is those little things along with the vignette of them driving around LA, which is to make up for them not actually being able to go to LA because they didn't have the money. That stuff just makes this movie weirder than it has to be, and not in a fun way. Just weird, cheap, and strange.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I like Rob Zombie, this movie sucks, and he should never do a comedy again.
Yeah.
If he loves the monsters, you could have fucking fooled me.
In my opinion, he should not be allowed to make any more movies.
I wouldn't go that far. I appreciate what he can do, but I mean, if he loved the monsters, man, he didn't do him justice at all. I'm disappointed in the effort that he put forth, because this is worse than I thought it could be. Because, I mean, in other movies, he's at least told a coherent story, and there's no reason this movie shouldn't have a story that makes sense or is at least simplified. It's overstuffed. There's way too much crap in this movie. The performances aren't good. The soundtrack is strange. It looks cheap. There is no reason to recommend watching this movie unless you're a Munsters super fan or a Rob Zombie super fan. Rob, you let me down. I mean, that's straight. Yeah, no, Robert Q Zombie is no. He's a man now. He's no longer Rob. This is the most disappointed I've been in a filmmaker in a while. I'm a big fan of his, and I mean, I've seen Kevin Smith make some bombs and still been able to stand by him and be like, well, he can bounce back. And I'm sure Rob can eventually make like another one of his horror movies that I have grown less and less interested in as time has gone on. And I might enjoy that more than I've enjoyed the Munsters, but I can't stress, like, the level of disappointment from this movie is just, like, immense. Like, I would never want to show this to anybody when I talk about Rob Zombie's an underrated filmmaker. Like, I feel like I can't make that claim as strongly now due to how bad this movie is.
Yeah.
And that is my opinion on Rob Zombie currently in 2022.
Well, you know my opinion.
It is what it is. And we saw the trailer, and listen, the trailer makes all the sense in the world because clearly the studio saw this movie and they were like, yeah, we're not giving it a theatrical release. And that was his goal. He wanted to make this cheaper movie and show what a great director he was and that he could deliver this property and they'd put it in theaters and he'd get a little theatrical run out of it and it'd be a great little boon for him. But they saw the movie and they're like, nah, this is awful. We're just going to video. We're going to dump it wherever. So he made that trailer by himself, which is why it's highly unprofessional. It has terrible sound. There's even a plosive pop in the voiceover because somebody just grabbed a microphone real quick and just gave the voiceover as fast as they could. They put out the trailer. Rob thought people were going to get behind him and people just started laughing and mocking it as the worst trailer ever made. And is this the worst movie ever made? No, but it is probably one of the worst of the year. I'll have a hard time thinking I can find movies worse than this one released within this calendar year.
Ditto, ditto, ditto.
I mean, I feel like I could talk for another 30 minutes about the things that let me down in this movie, but I'll just be a broken record about it. Don't watch this one. If you're a big Rob Zombie fan, do it so you can complete the whole catalog of his films, but otherwise move on to much stronger fare.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, are you ready for the reviews?
Yeah. They can't be great, so let's hear it.
Okay, so the TV show, 4.8 user review, 83% on Rotten Tomatoes, and 7.8 on IMDb. And I have a 1-star review of the show, which was hard to believe. I thought I'd give it a try as an adult. Now that I've seen it again, I'm sorry to report that this show is really poorly written. I enjoy a lot of old shows, and more specifically old radio shows, so I'm not just someone comparing older shows to what's done recently. That being said, I found myself wondering, have these writers ever heard a joke before? Much less written one? If it weren't for the insane amount of canned laughter, I might not have even realized that these things that were said were supposed to be jokes. The episode where the father goes to town to purchase a car for his daughter is particularly confounding. One has to wonder if a script was even written or if they are thinking, we'll just speed up the camera and have someone fall down a lot. I watched it gawking at the screen, trying to comprehend how the people that were involved in a delightful show, Leave It to Beaver, spawned this misguided comedy. So he didn't find the original show very funny, which I think it has a lot of charm. It may not be funny, but it's charming. Comedy
ages the worst out of any of the other real formats of cinema. So you will find a lot of things that were perfectly acceptable in a brand of comedy, just completely archaic and almost like an eyesore to you. The canned laughter, how he talks about things getting sped up happens a lot. That's just something they used for comedy in the 60s in a single camera show. And the Munsters leaned on that a lot.
Yeah, and like I said, not necessarily funny, but charming. It had some nice jokes about it.
Okay.
The Munster movie, it's at a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is very high.
Some critics did give this a good review. I was a little surprised by it. Yeah.
But that is the consensus when I was looking at reviews, is that either people really, 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 really hated this movie, or they loved it.
Yeah.
So there was no 3s or 4s. There was only 1s and 5s.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't have any other details on like IMDb or anything. It's just too new of a movie.
Yeah, the movie's less than a week old.
Here's a 1-star review. I didn't have any high hopes for this, but to stoop so low, one should have absolutely no talent whatsoever. I adored the Munsters TV show, which was funny, wise, and down to earth despite its unusual premise. A bit weird too, but with lots of heart and soul. But to sit through the Munsters, a Rob Zombie movie, you have to really collect all your guts and patience to do it. I agree, totally. Not only does it not pay any respects to the original, it is also downright idiotic, lacks direction and humor, which is present but non-existent, and it has an overall feeling like it's supposed to be a spoof of the series, not a prequel. Or even there, the movie doesn't get the job done. Actors are horrible, and their delivery of characters has little to none of the charms of Fred Gwynne. Yvonne DiCarlo or Al Lewis, they're just playing some dumb characters in the dumbest way possible. Music is just as bad. The whole movie seems to have just been shot in front of a green screen in Rob Zombie's backyard on the budget of a bag of cookies. It makes you wonder, who of hundreds of people involved ever believed this movie is a good idea?
Yeah, no, that's certainly true. I mean, it very much is. I can't really argue with too much that's in this guy's review.
Yeah.
Because he points out a lot of the things that really are problematic about the movie. So, I mean, it is what it is. I feel this just became less a talk about the Munsters. It is, let's just shit on Rob Zombie episode, which I know you love, and I didn't want this to happen. This is a very disappointing episode for me to have to come out here and shit all over Rob Zombie. I think the most positive things I could say was he loves his wife. That was the most positive thing I could come out of this whole movie. He loves his wife, and clearly he's going to the Homeboy Hall of Fame.
He's loyal to his friends and his family, so that is a good thing about Rob Zombie. And he's a great musician. I wish he would go back to being a musician.
Yeah, I don't know when was the last time he put out a record, but I haven't checked into one of those in a long time either. So
yeah,
Rob Zombie's The Munsters, avoid. And that's about it, guys. Sorry for any of the Rob Zombie fans who have unsubscribed from the show due to blinding hatred of us.
Yeah, listen, I'm sure we're gonna upset some people. Some people maybe really love his movie, but we just didn't really feel for it. So send us some of that hate mail if you would like to grittyRebootcast@gmail.com, or hit us up on any of the social media websites as well.
Yeah, that's Gritty Reboot at Instagram and at TikTok, and let us know how much we suck and how much Three from Hell is the finest movie ever made. You can let us know that, and I'll let you know how wrong you are. But that is Gritty Reboot for this week. We got a packed October. Once we are done with this movie,
spooky season.
Yeah, spooky season. Once we're done with this episode, we're running right to go bone up on the Hellraiser series, which will also drive you insane because you hate those movies too.
Yeah, this is like a whole. I hate all my hate movies.
Yeah, not me. I love Hellraiser, so we're gonna have a blast. But yeah, we're gonna check out Hellraiser. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode and let us know how much we suck. So see you guys.
Bye.